So I've seen a lot of people talking about episode Aigis, and some like me that are worried with how it's going to turn out. Although most of my worries are behind me, I still see quite a lot of people being skeptical or outright not getting the DLC day one, which is honestly understandable as pre-ordering is risky. However, instead of being a negative Nancy, which I most certainly have never done before. Yeah, well, whatever. Here are 7 reasons to get episode Aigis prior to release, or even if you're watching this post-launch. I still hope this video ages well enough for you to make this decision. Now, first and foremost, story continuation. Now, I think most people know this, but if you didn't, essentially this continues the story of Persona 3 with the events that happened after the main game story, known as the Journey in Fez. Most people are uncertain of the protagonist's fate within the journey, so now this DLC leads to the answer you are looking for. I used this joke already, didn't I? Did he live? Did he die? See, this is where you'll find the answer. I need a new joke or I'll become as cringe as Akutsuki. Or, I don't know. These problem-solving equations make me also feel like Minamimoto. Anyway, although this concept piece released with mixed perceptions of it, and not exactly liking it for the most part, I am confident with what we have seen, with how more expressive the characters are now, that's within the trailers. I think we'll actually have something that will actually express these characters well, while also hitting the story key points that it needs to without feeling awkward or just out of place. Secondly, Joker from Persona 5. Why Joker from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate? Because he's finally getting a game outside of Smash called Shimigami Tensei Persona 5. Now you may be wondering, is SMT Persona 5 and Persona 3 Reload the same series? It's not the same series for one key reason: Ellis owns the IP for Persona, while Shimigami Tensei Persona is owned by Sega, Sonic, as he is in SMT Persona 5. Alright, joking aside, I think this will be a nice challenge, hopefully, and since I never did the Persona 5 Royal ones because on PS4 it costed a decent amount of money, which kind of sucked at the time, but regardless, I am interested to see if they make him similar to Elizabeth. Although, what would have been more so cooler would be a FemC boss, as, you know, she wasn't really represented within this game, and having her as an actual boss would have been actually amazing to see finally, or at least some representation of her character. And although that does make sense for FemC to be in here more so, Joker being in here too does make sense, as, not to spoil anything, there are a few references to Persona 5 within the answer initially in Fez. I can't say for certain if these references will still be in Persona 3 Reload's version of it, but this is something that I just figured to point out here. Thirdly, playable toaster. I think it's a cooler aspect of this DLC as it lets you play as a different character, especially a toaster, rather than the protagonist. I think that one of the reasons I was so bummed about the season pass for this game is they could have expanded upon Shinji's story as to what he was doing during the Dark Hour, or even covering the Seas crew while they were first exploring Tartarus, so that you as the player would understand why it was so difficult to just explore the first block and not progress. Just overall though, if Atlas had multiple different DLCs where it followed different characters, or even games like an Akechi game, that would be sick. Regardless to say, as Aigis, she moves differently than the protagonist or is imitating him. You decide. Aigis also uses entirely different weapons than the protagonist, so you can have a lot more range when getting the upper hand on shadows. And although I didn't play this DLC when it was just initially the Fez release of it, I'm still pretty excited personally just, to play the Reload version of this and to somewhat experience this for the first time gameplay wise. As I never actually played the answer, I more so just watched the story as most people said it was a waste of 30 hours of grinding, so I just decided, no, I just feel like watching it instead. But more so, I just want to experience this for the first time gameplay-wise, and I think it'll be nice to play as Aigis. Number 4 would have to be giving different outlooks on how the party perceived the events of Persona 3 Reload. Now, episode Aigis / The Answer tried to do this, but it was butchered really badly, as you can't really do anything to get insight into these characters within Fez. Although I do believe this will be expanded upon in Reload, I just can't be certain if the hangout events essentially only take place with metas or they're going to take place with multiple different party members. Although we see, of course, Ken in this frame, we can't be certain if, Yukari will have, their moment together, or even, Mitsuru, etc. I'm just more so hopeful they will expand upon each character's perspective and maybe, get their feelings across better to make Aigis kind of understand what they're dealing with here, than it kind of just being left to the main story and the 30-hour grind fest to do that for you. So I'm really hoping that the hangouts aren't just so limited to metas. What I will say, however, even in the main story, this does give insight somewhat to what they are going through and what they have dealt with within the events of the journey. So overall, if you're really attached to these characters, I think this DLC you'll actually end up really liking, or hating for some characters. Fifthly, is fifthly a word? Well, guess we're rolling with it. Metas Toaster needs to happen. The more people that play this DLC, the more Metas Toaster will be in demand. So my proposal is you play this DLC so that Metas Toaster happens. You have 24 hours. I don't even know where that came from. I'm sorry, guys. Now, number 6 would have to be more music. Now, these are some of the coolest in the series, such as Heartfelt Cry, P3 Fez, Time Castle, and Maya's theme. I hope I said her name right. And I'm sure with even the newer OSTs that they're adding, I think it's Don't. That one also sounds really good. Of course, I haven't really listened to the new tracks really. I think it might just be Don't. I could be wrong with that, but just generally, there are just some really good songs within this DLC. There are just some of the best within the series, and you definitely should not sleep on them. Luckily, Persona 3 Reload has a revamped audio system so that you don't have to just press square and go all the way to the music and have Fuka play it for you. Luckily, that's all an in-game option now, so I don't know if this will be essentially available within the DLC and in the Journeys OST, which it should be. I don't see why it wouldn't be, so I'm hoping for that. And lastly, number 7. A bit of closure to the story of Persona 3 Reload. Now, although I initially hated the way the story was in this, I do think that they can improve elements of episode Aigis for it to be more of a satisfying ending. And not to give too many spoilers, I do hope they'll eventually return to P for a use quest, as that would bring the ultimate conclusion to Persona 3's story as a whole. As to why it's taken so long is beyond me. Anyways, those are my 7 reasons as to why you should get episode Aigis. Now, not necessarily at launch, you can really get it whenever you feel like it, but I at least hope this gives some relative context as to why this is somewhat important. I'm sure that many people have probably looked it up and have looked at the trailers to see if it's worth it for themselves, but I just figured to put my spin on it and just talk about why you should get it in my own way. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.